All right. Good afternoon, family. Thank you very much for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon. Um, yeah, all right. Yes, we are, Miss Bickham. Yep, we're rolling. Um, this is going to be a little bit different show than what I've been doing on the past. Um, I know that we study our history and we use our history and we use a lot of the the inventions um, and things of that magnitude to help us aspire to be like those persons that were inventing. I'm going to go back a little deeper and a lot longer in the past. I want to go back as far as I can and then come forward. And I'm working on a presentation to put up as well. So we'll have that as points of discussion too. Um, but I want to go back to the beginnings of African people. Okay. Number one, let me point out the African people are the oldest members of the human family on the planet. Okay. Minimally going back 3.8 million years to what was named by Lucy, but Ethiopians and the Kenyans called her Dignesh. And she was found in 1968 in the Old Dubai Gorge in Kenya, around the Kenyan area. And they renamed her uh, Dignesh, which means the most beautiful one. And she's estimated to be 3.8 million years old. And part of her remains are in the Cleveland Natural Museum, which is run by the man from Kenya, and hopefully and prayerfully he's still alive, run by the man in Kenya who found her remains before Leakey did. Leakey, of course, is given the credit, but he is not the one who found her remains. A brother from Kenya, and I will get his name and have it for us the next time. He found her name. He found her remains. And so they fought to be able to have her named, Dignesh instead of Lucy. Now, let me tell you where Lucy comes from. And most people may or may not know this, those who study, hopefully you do and you should. But Lucy comes from the song that the Beatles were singing, Lucy and the Sky with Diamonds. But if you put those words together, Lucy L, Sky S, and D, Diamonds, that's what they were talking about in the song. So they were talking about LSD. How he ended up naming her something like that, it's kind of a weird misnomer, but at least he got the Lucy part. In the book Origins by Leakey, he writes about this adventure and what he went through in order to be able to find her. But again, he wasn't the one to find her. What who found her was a team led by a young man from Kenya they were digging in the Old Dubai Gorge in Kenya. There's also footprints there. Now, why am I saying all of this stuff? Every woman, especially if she's African, has the mitochondrial DNA of this woman. She's our first most aged ancient ancestor who split from the apes to bring humanity to the world. That's 3.8 million years ago. And of course, if you do some research, you'll find out that these were beings, I don't want to say creatures or animals, beings that would get fruit that fell off the ground, nuts, things like that, because they hadn't evolved into the form that we are now. Now, moving forward, probably 3.2 million years. We have about seven. I have two dates or two sets of years: 780,000 years ago, or 130 years ago, depending upon what scientific principle you go by. You have the creation of Homo sapien sapien, which means upright man, right? But that too takes place on the continent of Africa. And its real name is not Africa, it's Alkebalan. So, that being said, now you get people who look like us, very fairly closely built and related to what we look like. Now, the Nile, what they call it now, or is used in Africa and in ancient Kemet, it's called the Hapi River, Hapi. The Hapi River is a place where it floods, it flows, it floods, it flows, but it's elevated because the beginnings of it is elevated in Uganda, Burundi, Rwanda, in that area, and so it flows downward. Seeing that that area is pretty peaceful, of course, there's no conflict. And what people are able to do is able to start civilizations and start cultures and start families around the Nile. As we move up the Nile, of course, we start to grow. Now, and of course, many things gets created from that: family structures, small city states, nation states, but they're kind of crude. But the more we move up there now, and that I like the date 780,000 years. As we move up the Nile in that period of time, of course, we start to build better and better structures because we become more knowledgeable. We become very clear that there's a force outside of us because we don't know where the wind comes from. We don't know why the sun shines. We don't know where the rain comes from. We don't know why animals are about. We have no clue what's going on in the evening. We learn how to build shelters for ourselves, and we start to grow in our knowledge of what's going on in nature. But nature dictates to us that it's God, right? So we always say Mother Nature, and Mother Alkebalan, or Mother Happy River, because when people start to domesticate and learn, they start to learn to be able to, oh, I can get fish from here, I can get fruits and vegetables from along the river, the Nile River, Happy River. I can start to get mud from there, and I can go ahead on and build my homes. But one thing about people from Alkebalan is we're nomadic. Of course, you know what being nomadic is. We move from one place to another. And as we move around and we move up to now, because there's no need of going somewhere where we got to fight, stay up to now. As we stay up to now, we start to build these other great kingdoms. And of course, even in the Bible, they're mentioned, right? Punt, Punt, Cush, Kush, Nubia, Nubia, and of course, ancient Africa, or I'm sorry, ancient Egypt. It was not named Egypt at the time. It was called Kemet, Khemet, Kemet. All right. So, by there being very little interaction with a bunch of other people, right, we were able to start to branch out. The Sahara Desert wasn't a desert, it was a lush area that was tropical. And we were able to go and branch out to different parts of Alkebalan and grow. Now, having to understand that there's a force outside of us. Well, where does the rain come from? Why is the sun shining? We started to develop an idea of God, of a being more superior to us. Okay. More superior to us, that allows us to be thankful for our existence, right? So, oh, the sun comes out and brings us warmth. The clouds come and it brings us rain. We don't know what this force is. So we come up with the idea, a connection that this has got to be something more superior to us, and it has an effect on our lives. But what we did inside of all of that knowing was we created city states and empires, right? We created um, massive structures that are still in existence today, that you can see any place and all over the place if you just look for them. So as you go up the Nile, starting with Punt, you see very small structures that are pyramidal in shape, but they don't stand up because they haven't got the science yet together. But they're still there. The stones are still there. As we move further up and we get more intelligent and we start to learn more about how we're operating and how we operate in this nationhood, so as we start to build nationhood, of course, we started to create laws, but those laws were based upon nature. You don't take more than what you need. If you take something, you give something back in return. Reciprocity. If I take fish, then I'm going to maybe leave the insides for something else to eat. I'm only going to take what I need or what I need for my family. We even started to build small ideas of government that several families would to get together and they would basically vote or have the elders be able to be the ones that would run things, right? So if there was a dispute, you go to the elders. And the elders and their wisdom would help ameliorate the dispute so that everybody's satisfied. So there's a period of time, and I'm moving a little bit forward. There was a period of time when you didn't have the destruction of life on the planet, on the continent, that you do now, because there were not these invading ideas, and everybody had to live within the code, and within that code, everything was balanced. It only becomes out of order when other forces come in.
Right. But I mean, I see that, and I see what you're saying because I was just watching something, and they was talking about that. Really, when you start seeing the downplay when invasion started
Yeah,
coming in.
yeah. You see a lot of the conflicts might have been internal, but they were small. They weren't like massive, widespread taking of life and things that happened in 1984 with Rwanda and Burundi. You would never see that because we family.
Yeah.
They were very clear that we were all related in some way, shape, or form.
Right. But now, when you go back and look, I forgot who I was watching, and they was talking. They were showing the history on that.
Yeah.
Like it was called the Golden Age, but that was
Right.
really just going down when they
Right.
started having more invasions
Right.
of Nubia,
Right.
saying Upper and Lower Kemet.
Right.
You know
Yes.
what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
I'm like, damn, when they was like, like when you start getting that, like while we had this great conflict now
Right.
with the Middle East,
Right.
that's North Africa.
Yeah. Well, it was all Africa. We controlled all of that.
Yeah, right. And like you said, that's not even the name Africa
No.
because that came
No.
from a Roman general Africanus. If I'm
Right.
not mistaken.
Yeah. Yeah. But we had the and I'm not trying to get to ancient Egypt yet because we'll be. But what people to understand is when we talk about history, we need to be talking about the history of what we did and how we created what we created for ourselves. Okay. We created civilizations for ourselves that we used to govern how we operated with each other in ourselves, right? Some of the highest laws that were written were, they call it 42 negative confessions, and that comes from E.A. Wallace Budge in his book, one of his books that he wrote about Kemet, and I want to say the Osirian drama is in volume 1 or volume 2, and he called it Asur was called Osiris, but that's after the Greeks come in. But there were 42 admonitions of Ma'at, and Ma'at was about peace and balance. and I'm sure y'all have seen her, and you've seen some of the, it's a woman, her wings are out. They're not up and curled, but they're out straight so that that shows balance. And a lot of the hieroglyphs, you will see her. So as I'm going to put together this presentation, so when we meet again, I'll be able to show you how we're moving. So I'll go back to the beginning and continue on to where I'm trying to go now. I'm not trying to get to ancient Egypt yet because that's going to take forever just to cover the things that took place there. Because ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet, was the pinnacle of the civilization that African people gave all of the world. You don't have reading, writing, arithmetic, building things, masonry. You don't have anything without ancient Egypt being what it is. And what they're trying to do now is destroy the image of it, call it Egypt, because the Greek couldn't call it. They said Egyptos instead of being able to call it Kemet because they wanted to take away from what it is. Like even the word chemistry comes from ancient Kemet because they were able to put things together. Alchemy as well, but it was spelled not Alchemy, it was Alkhemy. Okay, another story, and we'll have definitely, because we're going back so far, we'll put out another bibliography like we did before so that people can come and get some of this other information as well. Now, again, going back to what ancient Kush, Punt, and Nubia, right? So as we're moving up to now, slowly advancing, slowly stretching out to other parts of the continent, Alkebalan, we're expanding our knowledge base because we're learning as we're moving. But our main life and our main life source is along the Nile. You don't have to fight vines and cut down trees. And you don't have to do all of these other things you have to do out in the jungle areas, in the savannas. You don't have to compete with other animals. Although in the Nile you have to compete with the hippos and crocodiles. Okay, because you're competing with them as for food as well. But you learn very quickly not dealing with these animals. They have their time, we have our time, and you're not trying to hunt them because they hunt you, right? So we were in balance with what nature gave us. We didn't try and use it, we didn't try and abuse it, we didn't try and take anything from it other than what it is that we needed. And even as we started to grow in population, we're talking about 780,000 years ago, even as we started to grow in population, right? And we started to create these cities and these small nation states and things like that. It was never about abusing what we were given. We took what we needed and left the rest. Took what we needed, left the rest. Took what we needed, left the rest. So we stayed in balance. So we stayed within the laws that we saw nature and God governed us by. Now, of course, God is known by many different names. We could get into talking about that. We will later on. This is just the first show of, what we call the Black Watch. So I want us to go back first before we go forward, because that's a term that's in a con term called Sankofa. I want us to go back and fetch it so we understand where we are, where we should be headed, and how we even got into some of the other stuff that we're into, because that's part of what Black Watch is. Now, I'm using that term, and I hope I don't have any issue with the group that kind of started the term, one of my favorite rap groups called Exclaim. So I just want to put that out there. So if you heard it, and if any of them hear it, this is a homage to you, because just like you educated people, we want to continue to educate people. And if you're watching, please, if you have any questions, send them to us. I'll be glad to answer those questions. And hopefully pretty soon we'll be able to get a phone in here where we can have call in. I know this is an unusual time. You normally used to seeing me on Sundays, but this is my time. So, we'll work it out, so we'll make it work out. So anyway, as we're growing in population, as we're beginning to grow and expand as people, we're talking about 780,000 years ago. I'm sorry, 780,000 years ago. We're growing. We have families. Families come together and they create small villages. The villages grow bigger and they create small cities. The cities come together and create nation states, but they're governed in some fairly peaceful situations. There's no war. They may have skirmishes, but the Council of Elders, which is very important, okay, unlike now, a council of elders were the ones that said, hey, we got to make sure that we have less conflict. We have to make sure that we're not fighting. We have to make sure that we're not killing each other. We have to make sure that we follow the rules that nature and God has given us, because we can conceive God much greater then than we can now. And of course, there were priest class and there were craftsmen, because part of what is, and we see this even in our children and ourselves now, right? I would have been a teacher in ancient times because that's what I am now. So spiritually, this has followed me along. And I know I'll probably talk about some things that are controversial to people, but it is what it is because it's the truth. And using and building these nation states and these cities, and then start to understand these laws, of course, we wrote those laws down. So every person has a role to play in a society. It was never about what we have now, where young people didn't matter and elders didn't matter. Every person had a role to play. So if you were good at fishing, you went out and you fished. If you were good at hunting, that was and what your family lineage was. You and your family were hunters. If you were a person who could sew, then you and your family were the ones who make fabric to make clothes. If you could build things, then you and your family were the ones who went out and were hired to build stuff. And the trade was, they may trade food, they may trade water. Sometimes it might even be a spouse or whatever, where, okay, well, you can have my daughter, so I'm going to trade, and you're going to marry her, and then we get the benefit of what you do. Meanwhile, you get a wife. These were the rules and laws that governed us when we were on our own by ourselves, without other people bringing in ideas that weren't in balance with nature. And a lot of times, because it's not in balance with nature, as you can see what's going on in the world now, that would cause problems. When we're in balance with nature, when humankind, HUE, when humankind was in balance with nature, then you didn't have problems. It's only when we're out of balance that we have problems. So, as we move up to now some more, then of course you have the creation of Kush, which you have even more pyramid structures there, smaller temple structures there. And then we move further up to now, you have Nubia. Now, Nubians are dark skinned African people. So now, if we move up, we're talking about maybe we're 100,000 years. We moved up 680,000 years. So when we move up to where Nubia is, we're probably about 100,000 years out, because the structures of the pyramids are much older than what they claim. The structure of the Sphinx is much older than what they claim. Oh, let me add this point. Calendars were built based upon a cycle of flooding of the Nile, of the river Hapi. We built calendar systems as well. We built sundials so we know basically kind of sort of what time of day it may or may not be. We did we made these creations because they were important. You can tell when it's nighttime, of course, when the sun goes down, but you don't know what what other part of the day it is. And it was important for us to stay outside of the darkness, right? Or not go into the darkness. So we didn't go into the darkness much because the different animals would come out. So you had animals that you could see in the daytime, but you didn't know what was going on at night. So when a ring of fire around the village wouldn't allow us to see much, there's no need of going out. Oh, I'm not going fishing at night. I'm not going hunting at night because there's different creatures out there that may or may not take someone's life, depending upon whether they ate or not or whether they were hungry. So even the idea of thank you, Mr. Sims, I appreciate it. So even the idea of telling these stories of the unknown comes from villagers, especially ours, wanting to make sure that people didn't leave the safety of the village and ended up not coming back. Because of course that happened. So you tell stories about these animals that nobody knows anything about because but you hear the sounds and you use them in order to make sure people stay scared enough, especially kids, because we know how kids are, children are, instead of kids, my apologies. We know how curious children are. So you use these stories in order to keep the young people inside the village where it's safe at and they're guarded. Now, I don't recall anything that I've read that during ancient times that people had to worry about raids or have to worry about wars. They had skirmishes. I'm quite sure that as they branched off and some people developed some other ideas and other ways that they made livings, of course, you're going to have some conflict because now my idea is a little different than yours and we may have a skirmish, but most of the time it was taken care of very peacefully. So you can have a population of 4, 5, 600 million people in a short time of 600,000 years. And you can expand and move to different parts of the continent because we're nomadic. Once I don't, okay, well, this particular village and city state is overpopulated. So now we're just going to go and start something somewhere else. And nature governed how you perceive the laws that you originally got 700,000 years ago. So the law of moving up the Nile and it was very peaceful and there was no conflict is going to be completely different than when you move towards West Africa or parts of the Sahara when it was still lush and green. Now you got these other animals, you got trees and plants and things like that. So those laws kind of sort of have to be flexible, but you still stayed in balance with them. You didn't just cut down the whole savannah and I wanted to build houses. You just cut it all down, and you had to figure a way to replant. Or you didn't cut down all of the trees in the Sahara in order to be able to build houses or use them for trees, or I mean, use the trees for firewood, or use the trees to build boats, or hunted the animals to almost extinction. That never happens because we understand balance because we still got to eat. And looking at our future generations, they have to eat as well. So we only take what we need and we leave the rest. Overindulgence does not happen until other groups come in. And then we have a problem from there. But once again, that's later on. I want us to stay in Africa, right? Because if we constantly talk about my self esteem, well, your self is attached to the group. And if we're clear that the group is what gave us civilization, what gave us reading, what gave us writing, what gave us these techniques to eat, what gave us these techniques to build, if we are clear that we're the progenitors of civilization, math, science, reading, writing, doing, building, then one invention, and this is my opinion, and I know people may differ from it, one invention that doesn't move the whole group along is irrelevant because I don't see a black lawnmower company that creates lawnmowers. I don't see a black bed making company that makes the beds. But in ancient times, if you were a carver, you could make beds for people. You could build homes for people. And that became your craft. And that would be passed down to your family. And that would be your family lineage until something else happened. If you knew a young person had the propensity to grow flowers or to go out and harvest food, well, they're going to be a farmer. We want to support that. One of the greatest botanists that ever lived was Dr. George Washington Carver. I, if we understand this ideology, then people in his family were also botanists, even going back to his ancient beginnings. So I want us to understand a much bigger concept. The bigger concept is that the task that you're good at, doctors, nurse, teacher, um, I don't want to say athletics because there's a difference in athletics then and now. It's different. Writer, I guess I'll say athlete, um, painter, person who's a builder. Your ancient people that thought of you millions of years ago, that knew that you were going to exist, are the ones that gave it to you. It is not for naught that you just happen to be and happen to have a specialty because it's spiritual as well. Because we created the spiritual systems that we talk about now that we use or are part of or whatever. We created those too. Now, let's move forward a little bit. Nubia. Nubia is important because it's an African city state, it's an African nation. So we're still moving up to now, right? So as we're moving up to now, then from there, we continue to move upward towards the delta. And I'm really not trying to get into ancient Kemet yet because the presentation and the slides I want us to be able to put up and look at, I want to show the progression of how we went from the beginnings 3.8 million years ago to ancient Kemet, where we resided at our highest level and gave many things to the world. That's not to say I'm standing alone and now on purpose, because that's where our greatest, most peaceful time came from, where we didn't have issues that we had later on, right? And really, the issue that we had as we branched out and became nomadic was just dealing with what was going on with the areas where there were trees and jungles, whereas along the now, there was nothing there. The Nile would flood, the fruit and stuff would grow, we'd harvest it, the flood again, fruit and stuff would grow, we'd harvest it, make sure we threw the seeds back so that we could go ahead on and they grow next year. So that became our way of farming. That's it. It's kind of sort of simple because life was very simple then. It didn't get complex until much, much later on. So if we know that Nubia's got to be 80 to 100,000 years old, then of course Kemet has got to be minimally 80,000 to modern times. But it's not like what it is now. It's definitely not like what it is now. What it is now is not where it was when it was at its height. Because all civilizations, I need y'all to remember this, all civilizations go through a period of or a cycle of going to its height and then coming back down and bottoming out, just like everything else, right? In the northern hemisphere, we're getting ready to go into fall. We're in fall and we're headed towards winter, and then the cycle comes around and we'll go back. And in 90 days, 120 days, or whatever, will be spring back in the summer again. So we continuously going in the cycle. Uh-oh, sorry. All right. Civilizations do the same thing. And a civilization can only be attacked when it's the weakest. That's all. Period. Because not you're not going to attack another civilization when it's at its strength. That's not going to happen ever. Well, I guess we might go into just a little bit of ancient Kemet. We got about 15 minutes or so, 15, 20 minutes. Um, so if we guesstimate maybe Nubia 100,000 years, then you have 100,000 years of development of the ancient Kemites moving forward up to now towards the Delta. Now, let me please let you all know, okay, even if you go back and you read the Bible, Kemet, Egypt, Africa is mentioned many, many times in the beginnings of the Old Testament. If it's that important to mention it, then you know had to be very significant in the development of these other ideas that come from it. Going to be controversial. Some people may say I'm lying. Go look it up. Go research it. But Judaism comes out of ancient Kemet, right? Supposedly Moses was the brother of Ramesses and was a priest of the temple of On and knowledgeable in all the wisdom of ancient Egypt. That's what your Bible says. Go back and read it. It might be in, I know it's in Genesis, it might be in chapter 2, chapter 3, but go back and read it. So if ancient Egypt was important then to create this book, the greatest, one of the greatest books in the world, according to people who buy them and use them, then that means ancient Kemet had to be much greater than that. And if you look at Ramesses II, he's supposed to be Moses' brother, bro. Moses is supposed to be his brother. Or however the story goes, then you got something else. Now, since y'all making me go to ancient Kemet anyway, and I wasn't trying to, but I'm still gonna go back up to now. Um, but let me mention this real quick. There is a Nubian pharaoh called Takara who unites Upper and Lower Egypt after Upper and Lower Egypt was separated. Kemet, I'm sorry, was separated during the fourth dynasty. I have to make sure I get my little figures right, but he's very, very important. And of course, they name a city after him called Takara. So that means the Nubians have played a role in ancient in Kemet becoming Kemet, because of course they're related. Now, if you go to some West African countries, you still have the same ideology. It's not only my brother, but he's also my uncle, because the bloodlines are pretty tight, regardless of what it is that it may or may not look like. So one of the calendars, and I'm gonna mention this, and I'm gonna try and get out of Kemet, that was created was a calendar that's 25,860 years old. Because over a very long, long period of time, the ancient Kemites studied the constellations from the southern orientation and not the northern orientation, like we look at it. And they found out that each constellation remained in power 2,155 years. That's a long time. So if you multiply 2,155 by 12, you get 25,860 or 70. Because I check my math. That's a very powerful calendar. And that's a long time. So you had people and their families living for a very long time to be able to chart the stars in order to come up with that calendar. And for those of you that don't believe it, you can look it up. But there's also a film that came back out in the 80s and a TV show called Stargate. And they used that calendar or a replica of that calendar in order to be able to move back and forth between dimensions according to this particular storyline. Well, that's the calendar. So to sit there and understand that a particular um, star is in charge for 2,155 years until it changes out, and not the 30-day calendar that we have now, because we created that later on, even though it's given credit to, um, it's called a Gregorian calendar, so somebody else gets credit for it. These are the things that are more, to me, important to be familiar with because it birthed a group of people and everybody in that society benefited from what everybody else was doing and not just individualistic. It's not selfish. If I'm planting, Uncle Mick gets food from what I'm planting because that's family. And the notion of being able to be protective of each other is very, very important. And watch out for each other, very, very important. We may have squabbles, we may have skirmishes, but very little loss of life took place. There was a level of respect that was there because if this is my elder, I'm going to respect him because he has wisdom. And there was no such thing as old age homes and nursing homes and all the other stuff because it was the job of the elder to help take care of the little child when they no longer could work. And it was the job of the elder to teach the little child those and to see what specialness that child had in order for that to be groomed so that that child can become what it's supposed to be, who he or she should be. So we had all of these elements that we no longer have because, oh, you can do what you want to. No, if you show a propensity to grow flowers, then I'm going to need you to grow flowers. That's right. Thank you. Yeah, and we do need that again. We need to go back to, watching out for each other. I had a little incident in school today. I felt kind of bad about it because, a couple of young people got into a little skirmish, and I felt bad because they showed me that they were good kids, and I didn't think that was going to happen. But we all learned. I get it, no problem. But yes, we definitely need to go back to that. We definitely need to make sure that, and I know again, I'm sorry, I'll go back to that point. When people talk about self-esteem, that's being individualistic. But if I'm very clear that my group has this ideology, then I feel great about my group, which makes me feel great being part of the group. Sometimes, oh, I feel bad because what I didn't get. Oh, I don't, but my group is good. My family's good. My group is good. My group did this, so I have a different view of myself being part of a larger group. Okay, we have to also be careful about some of this rhetoric that's going on. Well, you sound like you're being racist. No, I'm not being racist. Racism will require that I have some sort of power. Or I do have is knowledge, but people got to go do their part with it as well. It's about being able to tell the truth, right? Now everybody wants, well, we're part of the human family. Yeah, but we're the older part of the human family. You go, okay, we can all say we're part of the human family, not a problem. But the more ancient human family comes from ancient Al Kibalar. Nowhere else. No. One of my teachers, and I will bring him in later on, he has a book called Civilization or Barbarism. It talks about a two cradle theory. One cradle group of people born in Africa, another group of people born in Europe. His name is Dr. Shankat Job. Get the book. Get all of his books. Read them. Study them. But if we were clear that the accomplishments that we did before things turned were, look at the pyramids. The pyramids still exist. The Sphinx is there. If you go down the Nile, not up the Nile, if you go down the Nile back towards its origin, you see along the Nile all of these structures that are still there. And from there, I don't want to say science, spirituality developed from it. Because religion is dogma. But even if we look at the principles of Ma'at, the 42 admonitions of Ma'at, you can clearly see where the 10 commandments come from.
Facts.
But no, we don't want to talk because we don't want to offend people. I'm not offending you, I'm enlightening you. So next show, I'm going to put up the 42 admonitions of Ma'at and the 10 commandments. You can see very clearly where they come from. One group way more ancient than the other group.
One being told they know what not to do, and another group you tell them what they
can do. Right. Yeah. Admonitions mean I have not eaten more than I'm supposed to. I'm not taking more than I do. Because at the wing of the heart, when you leave here, you got to be able to say, I have not done these things to each and every one of those laws. That's balance in the world. Not I shall not you thou shall not kill, but you killing people anyway. Whether you're doing it through food or a gun. But that's a comparison we'll do later on. I'm trying to stay out of Egypt because we're gonna be in ancient Kemet for a long time. Hopefully that's the plan. But okay, let me give you a couple of authors to go by. And yes, we'll put another book list up because it's a little bit different than the book list from before. C.F. Volney called Ruins of Empires. Right? One book that I mentioned before, Destruction of Black Civilization, because we can see, if you read it, you can see what's going on right now again. Okay? It's the same thing happening over and over and over again. It's not changing. Dr. Chancellor Williams lays that out for us. Gerald Massey, he wrote three-volume set, Natural Genesis, Book of Beginnings, and Ancient Egypt, Light of the World, which he describes how people saw religion based upon what was going on in nature during ancient times. The thing about Gerald Massey was was kind of an atheist and didn't believe in anything until he makes a trip to ancient Kemet and he sees all of these people that are no longer in existence because, of course, of the Arab invasion, and we'll get to that later on. But he's able to see the monuments, he's able to see the carvings, he's able to see the paintings, and then looking at all these things, then he starts to study and write about it. he starts to become a spiritual person.
Mm.
I mean, this guy was a hardcore, I don't believe in God because of all the things he saw or whatever. But when he goes and he takes this trip, that changes his view of religion,
Mm.
and he moves from out away from the dogma of even being an atheist to somebody who is now, I'm on a spiritual journey, and the African people are the ones who help me. And this is where they give everything to the world, which is the reason why his last two volumes said is Ancient Egypt, Light of the World, which he talks about everything that ancient Egypt gives the world.
Fine. But when you go study, just even with the Greeks, they study at the foot of the Africans.
Yeah, yeah. But see, I was just mentioning that to a group of brothers a couple nights ago who mentioned that the Greeks, to be a master teacher, you had to be a student of another master teacher for 33 years.
Right.
The Greeks could only last 3 years.
Right.
Put that together with masonry.
33 and 30.
Yes, sir. You can only, the first thing when you get in, you're only supposed to get the first 3 degrees.
Right.
And then the rest of your life, you live up to get to be the 33rd degree Mason, right? This is from reading.
Right.
I'm not part of the club yet. If
Right.
I decide to go that way. But
Right.
if you can only last 3 years because of the rigors of study,
Right.
but if you want to be a master, you have to study 33 years. Now, I've been teaching for 28. So I still got 5 years to go to become a master teacher. I'm still an infant.
Right.
Right? You're still a little baby.
Yeah.
Right. That'll be 66, 67. And then I can say I'm a master teacher then.
Right. Of knowledge.
Fun. Yeah.
Knowledge.
Yeah. So I don't know nothing.
Right.
I mean, what do you know? Nothing. I don't know nothing. Because master teacher levels requires you to be in the grind 33 years. So if and I'm using that for myself. When, oh man, you're a master teacher. No, I'm still an infant. I still got 5 more years to go. I'm still, now when I reach 33 years, now you can call me that because then I've reached the pinnacle of what our ancient ancestors said that required to be a master teacher. So you've been in video audio engineering for 10 years. You still got 23 years to go before you master it. Then you can say you're a master whatever. Producer, videographer, the audio editor, all of that. Until then, you're still a baby. You're just learning. You're just learning.
Infant stage.
You're still at the infant stage. So I might have on pull-ups now.
Right.
Or Garanimals or whatever the stuff we used to, but I still got 5 years to go before I can put on a full pair of pants and a tunic that say teacher.
You do, but see, we need more of this stuff like this where they can see. Cause all we getting is boys in the hood, menace to society. Right. You know what I'm saying? We really need to go back. Don't get me wrong. I love everybody that can play sports, but we also need some thoughts. Some thinkers.
Right. Well, right. Because what did Malcolm say, and many other people are now repeating it, right? Is he said we're the only race of people that you go to comics and politicians and entertainers in order to get an opinion. Right. We're not people who study and think.
Right.
And trust me, in our new show, we're going to branch out in some other. I'm just giving y'all. Yeah. Well, I'm just giving y'all a little bit of food. But yeah, we're going to look at other stuff too, and I know everybody, if you want to vote, go ahead, but make sure your vote is going to count so that it means something to you. If it don't mean nothing, if you can't get no pull from the people you voting for, what you voting for?
Right. Yeah. We don't know how, that's why we got to go, like they say, back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Where you can show when we was a great people.
Can you imagine going to school suited and booted every single day back in the 10s, 20s, and 30s, that everybody was dressed and you had a shirt and tie on every single day, every student, every teacher, no matter what?
Right.
You go to school shirt, tie every single day.
Right.
I don't do it, but I'm just saying. Now, I'm saying that and I'm going to slap my own hand. I'm going to start doing it more. Everybody, this is the image that we had. but the level of scholarship that we did, the level of scholarship, what do you think it is to build a pyramid? They have not figured out that engineering yet. And the pyramids are over 15, 20,000 years old.
Facts. But that's a high science they ain't got control of.
Right.
Could you imagine if they did what we would be at? Unbelievable.
But,
they would really we'd be stuck.
But here's the thing. If we understood that our ancestors did that and we're related to them, and you understood, you were very clear about that, we don't have no self-esteem issue. I'm related to the pyramid builders. I'm related to great civilizations on the west side of Africa.
Oh no, facts.
You know, so
they said it's in you.
Yeah,
it's heaven is. They let you know. It's just how but we got to get off these drugs that we on. Far as the weed, the pills, all this stuff. How can you unlock that gene or that whatever open up like what our family had? The family had before us that was building. How can we unlock that again?
Well, we're number one, we have to study. Right. So that's what we're not doing. We're not studying anything. Okay. And I'm not trying to speak to you all in a vacuum. I'm telling you, these are the things that brought me to where I am, and I'm still an infant, but that means we can have dialogue. So eventually we're going to put a phone in here so we can take calls and we can have dialogue. Even if I put my number up there during this time, I don't care, because we want to have dialogue with people, because we got to learn, because the only way is Sankofa means go back and fetch it. And that comes from the Akan people. All right. That comes from the Akan people. Go back and fetch it. From Ghana. Go back and fetch it. You know, and in 1619, please, 1619, we were on the lowest part of our cycle. But there's some other things that happened to us along the way with other groups of people that made that happen. But come over there and deal with us 4,000 years ago. Thutmose III had been dead for 200 years, and the Chinese were still sending tribute to him until they found out that he was dead. And there were no more. The armies were no longer. The Kemetic armies were no longer in China. And that's the only time they stopped sending tribute. Elephants, you name it, they sending it. He'd been dead for 200 years. But yet, we don't want to study that. It's there, it's available. We just gotta go study.
Right.
But I'm gonna feed you. I promise you that. You just gotta go do the work. I'm gonna put it on the plate. You gotta pick the spoon up. You gotta go eat. We gotta go eat.
We got a minute, brother.
Okay.
What do you got to say? Because this the infant stage of the Black Watch.
Right. This is the very first show. Next time we're gonna have a presentation that we can put up, and we can have these discussions along the way. So we'll go back to 3.8 million years ago with Dignesh, and then we'll move our way forward to ancient Kemet. And then we'll stay in ancient Kemet for a while. And we'll branch out and do some other stuff. We're just not going to stay in Africa, but we got to go, ancient El-Kebalan, but we've got to understand that the greatness that ancient El-Kebalan gave the world is in us as well.
Facts. But I can't wait till when you break down the Kemet, because we ain't had that here, and I want to get that to the family.
Yes, sir.
So they can just see, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
They can honestly see some great things. I think that's what Flint is really missing here.
Well, not only that, but most of us anywhere where we are in large populations, we're missing. And it's not that I'm not the only one out there. There are other people out there, and there are people that know more than me. I'm just thankful given the opportunity. And, I want them to have the opportunity too. So, that's what we do. That's what we're going to do, because I'm not the only one.
Facts.
I'm not the only one. I'm just one of the ones.
Facts. No, we do. I think we really do need that. And with you coming on board, you're going to give us that.
Yes, sir.
You're going to give us that, because they need to learn about Egypt. We need to learn that it's more testing.
Yeah.
Just the fugazi, the foolery, the tomfoolery, they say.
Oh, the tomfoolery, man. That's just, and And that's the thing that the other culture highlights.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, they do.
Let's be real clear. They highlight that because, see, we told you that's the reason why it's okay for us to do these things to you. And that's how they do it.
Facts.
Because we're always the group that's going to be criminalized, especially young black men, young African men.
Facts.
Yeah, they're always going to criminalize us because that makes it easy for you to do stuff to them.
Right.
You don't see their humanity. It's okay. They can do stuff.
But that's why we got you here to change that up for the people.
Well, yes, sir. Yes, so we're gonna do our damnedest. We ain't gonna do our best. We're gonna do our damnedest.
We're gonna run with it.
We're gonna, what? We're gonna be some Barry Sanders, Walter Payton, Jim Brown,
Gail
Sayers,
OJ,
the whole deal, and some stiff arming too.
Facts.
So we're gonna do some Derrick Henry stiff arming. Because if you come, you better make sure you have your research. Come and be on some stuff and not know. Not only am I gonna eat you up, I'm gonna pat you back up, and I'm gonna give you something to eat.
We're gonna show you that Black lives really matter.
Right.
Yeah.
To Black people.
Right. And that's what we gotta do. We gotta, like I say, you're gonna do it. We're gonna show them who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Paint a different picture.
Yeah. That's right.
And
once and see, the thing is they don't want us to wake up. Because if you wake up, then you become a problem.
Facts.
Let me say this real quick and we'll be done. All right. This day in 1966, October 15th, was the birth of the Black Panther movement, the Black Panthers for Self-Defense by Dr. Huey P. Newton, who became a doctor later on, and Bobby Seale. So thank you all as a Vanguard group for allowing us to be more aware of what's going on in our community and to set up programs that the government now runs in order to make sure that they're in control instead of us being in control. And on that note, fam, we'll see you next week. This is Black Watch.
Peace.
Peace.